Hello and welcome to SimCast, the higher education simulation podcast. My name's Tony Jeremy. I'm the academic lead for simulation-based education at UEA Norwich.
Hi everybody, my name's Lawrence Hill and I'm the chair of the simulation group in the School of Health Sciences at UEA Norwich. Welcome to the podcast. So today, Tony, we're going to be talking about Debrief, and specifically we're going to be talking about certain archetypes of facilitator that can derail a debrief, right?
Yeah, we are indeed. If you enjoy this video, please give us a like. Equally so, if you don't like it, give us a dislike, but let us know in the comments why, because we're always keen to improve. To keep up to date with all things sim-related, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to check that notification bell.
Right, I've been unnecessarily excited about this one, haven't I?
You have indeed.
Yeah, and because today we're going to be talking about...
Well, hang on. I've got a button for this. Prepare, brace yourself.
The four horsemen of the Debrief apocalypse.
Okay, I'm never pressing that button again.
That'll do.
If that was horrific for you, please give us a comment below.
Apologies. Okay, so no, let's get started then. So I think we both agree when Debrief is done well, it provides a really constructive and facilitative environment for learning and discussion. And we talked in episode 5, didn't we, about how debriefing done poorly can end up people turning into tutorial mode, or worse, it can erode the learner's confidence in what they're doing.
Yeah, and we hinted about a couple of these debriefers of the apocalypse, the horsemen of the apocalypse, didn't we, in episode 5? So in our eyes, who are the 4 different archetypes that you're likely to encounter as debrief facilitators?
Yeah, I mean, we're sure people are going to have their own opinions on these, and I'm sure everyone will have a view, but we think that 4 kind of broad archetypes are the groupie, the critic, the tutor, and the hero. And what we're going to do over the course of this podcast is we're going to talk about why each of the 4 of those horsemen of the debrief apocalypse exist, some of their traits, and perhaps a little bit about how we can recognize them in ourselves when we naturally start to embody those archetypes.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important part of it is that self-reflection and recognizing when you might have slipped into that role. So anyone watching, if you think that you've fallen foul to one of these archetypes, please let us know in the comments below. Equally so, if you can think of another type that we've completely missed, pop it in the comments below. It'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it'd be great, wouldn't it, to put together like a full taxonomy of debrief apocalypse traits. That would be really cool. So the first one we want to talk about was the groupie. Yeah, so the groupie... We think the groupie exists because basically we all want our learners to do well, don't we?
Yeah. So the groupie is kind of the yes man, the hype man, the really wants to sort of embody that you've done such an amazing job.
Yeah.
And whilst the elements of that need to exist within the debrief, it can't be the be all and end all, which it sometimes is.
Yeah, it can't be. You're right. And we think that we all probably show this personality type or this trait at certain times because we really want to foster a warm and supportive and nurturing learning environment. And sometimes that maybe overspills a little bit into groupie mode. Yeah,
and also we also might be mindful of ensuring that we're trying to provide a positive learning experience. We might be overly concerned about psychological safety, and then that overspills into just literally giving unadulterated praise wherever we go. And the problem with that is, particularly in healthcare, and in simulation, if something critical does happen, that still needs to be unpacked. Yeah. And I think for groupies, that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, it is. I think that's hard, isn't it? Because it's sort of, you don't particularly, if what you want to do is build everyone up, if what you're concerned about is building the confidence in your learners, in some ways, the last thing you want to do is erode what they've done and say, yeah, okay, so when this was happening, I noticed that X happened. What were you thinking at the time? What you really want to say is, if you really want to build people's confidence, I thought that the way that you managed that particular situation was really effective. Well done. So the traits that we start to see.
How can we identify whether we are slipping into groupie territory?
Yeah, I think it's about identifying thinking about what the traits are, and I think it's about thinking about why people want to sort of give that kind of positive affirmation. So I would say why do we want to do that? Well, we want people to have a positive experience. We want them to enjoy what they're doing, and we want us to be evaluated positively as well. So there's probably an element of that at play, that not only do we want the learners to do well, we also want to be a good facilitator in their
do
eyes.
a good job ourselves. So it's almost kind of a, if I scratch your back, you'll scratch mine sort of approach.
Yeah, potentially. But I think that what groupie facilitators tend to do is they give learners what they want to hear rather than what they perhaps need to hear at times, because they are perhaps hedging more towards building their confidence than their competence.
Yeah. And again, we've mentioned before about the difficulty in the skills in delivering really good facilitative debrief is you do have to unpack critical events. Sometimes you need to have some prickly conversation. And I think for people who are naturally groupies, they find that really, really challenging.
Yeah. People that naturally avoid any kind of confrontation or, confrontational dialogue, or even argumentative dialogue, or presenting kind of conflicting perspectives, perhaps particularly in a vulnerable learner group or a new learner group. That can be quite difficult to sort of slip out of that, because it's well intentioned. That's the thing. Is that the groupie mentality, the groupie facilitator mentality is never meant in a destructive way, but what it does do potentially is rob learners of the opportunity to learn from challenging and prickly areas of practice.
Yeah, the other thing as well is, I've encountered a couple of people, maybe not just always in debrief and simulation, but other walks of life who have this really sort of positive outlook, is sometimes that then it doesn't become less genuine, but people kind of expect it of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the genuine praise almost gets diluted.
Yeah.
So that could be a potential challenge as well.
Definitely. So that's the first of our 4 archetypes, the groupie, the kind of the person who's overly affirmative, overly positive. The kind of flip side of the coin there is the critic. We've all seen one of those in simulation facilitation, right?
Yeah. So these are the people who micro-analyze everything. And again, like we mentioned with the groupie, I think their intentions are honourable.
Absolutely. I think the critic's kind of philosophical approach towards debrief is that they really, really want the learner's practice to be safe and effective. The critic is focused on making sure that the learners perform tasks as perfectly
and intended,
as possible.
These people in the natural environment are the perfectionists, aren't they? They're the people who do everything by the book.
Yeah. And, like all simulation facilitators, the critics, they really want their learners to do well. And particularly critics want students to develop their competence through simulation. Where the groupie was perhaps more concerned with building the learner's confidence, the critic is probably more kind of focused on competence.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. I guess the problem with this then is for the critic to distinguish what is important to unpack in the debrief, and again, to lead a facilitated conversation rather than I guess the critic could then start to dip into another one, which which is the tutor could then start to teach. So what's valuable and what's not? And I think for a critic, it's hard to let go of things, particularly if they haven't been done to their standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you're saying there, we're kind of previewing the kind of tutor mode. But I think one of the benefits of the critic is that they are continuously reflecting back to the learner. They're saying to the learner, okay, so what did you do in that situation that wasn't quite right? What did you do that wasn't wrong? Okay, so you missed that. What was your thinking behind that? You missed this bit, and your tone of voice at this section was, and so at least in the critic's defense, what they're doing is they are reflecting back onto the learner and saying, can you think about how you might do this differently? The
problem is if you're the learner on the receiving end of that, you're going to have really, really thick skin to not take it to heart, particularly if it's about your personal performance. And then this is where if you, again, are starting to have those suspicions that you might have those critic traits about you. This is where advocacy with inquiry could work really, really nicely.
Yeah, definitely. And we should definitely come back to that. I think that, like you said, the risk of the critic probably has the greatest risk associated with it in terms of diminishing learner confidence in themselves as a clinician / practitioner. But I also think the critic also poses the greatest risk in terms of undermining the pedagogical value of simulation. Because if we experience that heavy critique, then we are naturally going to be less likely to engage in an immersive manner, because we're giving more of ourselves. If we engage in that fiction contract and think, yes, we are, that is us in that simulation, then that critique is personal to me.
Yeah. You're likely to have learners who feel like they've been put through the ringer if they've been on the receiving end of an overly harsh critic.
Yeah. So, I mean, a critic in terms of a facilitation, a debrief facilitator, is someone who probably has a really very good understanding of how practice should be done.
Yeah.
It's probably someone who is, like you said, attention to detail, a rigorous person who really
they're
wants
the people that
to do
know your professional regulations and codes inside out, back to front.
Yeah.
They know their algorithms and all of these things, and they're invaluable in terms of part of the team and the performance. It's just understanding when it's how far is too far when you're a critic.
Yeah.
When we think about debriefing.
So I think we can think about the critic and the groupie as being two horsemen of the debrief apocalypse, but also
yin and yang.
Yin and yang, or two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
I think, getting that balance. In fact, how do you get that balance right between that critical speech, that kind of critical element that you will put into a simulation debrief, and that kind of constructive, affirmative kind of speech that you use with learners?
Well, if I'm completely honest, I don't think I always get it right.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have a certain amount of self-awareness. I think if you're debriefing well, you should be speaking less and facilitating conversation. And then that will give you enough time to perhaps reflect on what you might be about to say. So I think being measured in what your insights are into that debrief is important. I think, again, without wanting to sound like a broken record with what we've been saying with a lot of the episodes to date, is if you're confident with what the learning outcomes are, and also what maybe some of the unintended learning outcomes that are developing are, you'll know when to perhaps shelve some things if you are naturally more of a critic. Equally so, you'll know that there might be important areas to address, and you're going to have to come out of groupie mode. And you're not there to be their friend. You're there to facilitate a conversation of a reflective conversation of learning, even if it means putting performance under the spotlight. And in both of those situations, again, techniques like advocacy inquiry work really, really well because it puts you in the middle. Yeah, you're neither too nicey or too overly critical. Yeah, and you're inviting the learner to critique their own performance rather than you doing it for them.
Yeah, exactly. Advocacy with inquiry promotes that open dialogue, doesn't it? It promotes the discussion of the rationale behind what was happening or the sequence of events that led to that. I think one of the deficits of a purely groupie or purely critical perspective is that they tend to lean towards kind of evaluative statements. If you sort of say, "Oh, that was really good." Was that good? What would anyone else like to say? Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it's good. Good.
How is that useful?
Good. It has no benefit in terms of deepening learning or reinforcing the intended or unintended learning outcomes.
And of course, the risk then is the good then inadvertently fills into things which weren't so good. But you naturally just go, well, that was still good.
Yeah, it wasn't as good.
But people receive that differently, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And I think that the critic, even though it's probably not giving that, the critic is unlikely to be saying, frankly, that was rubbish. And they're unlikely to be offering those overt statements of evaluation that the groupie might. To the learner, I think they still are interpreted as an evaluation. This kind of micro detail analysis is also perceived as an evaluative kind of comment.
Do you think if the critic goes to that micro level, what do you think are the chances of them seeing the bigger picture unfolding, where they go, oh, hang on, I've lost the group.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting too focused on this, and actually I haven't seen the reactions of the learners in front of me and how they're responding to this critique.
I'm thinking, if I'm a learner in that group, thinking,
Yeah.
am I going next? Are we changing rooms before the next simulation, or have I got, this critic, velociraptor facilitator
So how do you
satisfy?
How do you develop that awareness? What do you think?
Or how do you develop that awareness?
Is this another example of the importance of co-debriefing, so that someone can rein you in?
I think that's definitely a huge plus point for co-debriefing, because I think if you've got like terms like the critic and the getting a bit groupie there, Tony,
Getting a bit groupie,
yeah, then I think you've got that, but you've got that element of humour to like sort of prick the bubble of unnecessarily positive or unnecessarily negative kind of vibe.
When we were talking about these and when we were writing them down, I definitely did a bit of self-reflection and thought, I've definitely been a groupie, I've definitely been a critic, I've definitely been a tutor, and I've been a hero from time to time as well.
Yeah.
But I think in the heat of the moment, sometimes you can't see the wood through the trees. So again, having someone to just nudge you and go, same thing when you're leaning in with questions rather than using techniques like advocacy with inquiry.
I think advocacy with inquiry is really helps stops one from going to either of those two archetypes. I think another kind of advanced kind of metacognitive skill that we have to develop as simulation educators is reflexivity as well. That capacity in the moment to notice the way that we are responding to what's happening around us and to adjust it in the moment. And I think it's unavoidable going into critic or groupie mode at times, because sometimes things happen and someone needs to say, do you know what? The way that for a first, second year student, for a third year student,
that was a tough simulation. You did a really good job,
and you negotiated that masterfully.
Yeah,
and then it's for these reasons, or then it's opening that up.
Sticking to task.
So can anyone tell me what it was about the way that this person navigated that situation that made it so effective? And then we're into a discussion.
And I like your terminology that you use when you look at readdressing the learning outcomes. In what way and to what extent have we met them? It really helps you to be balanced and down the middle with it and then invite those learners. I think we need to go on to the other two types.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on. So the next archetype is the tutor. All right. And in our discussions before the pod, we think this is probably one of the most common.
In higher education, definitely.
In higher education.
Yeah, if you're comfortable with teaching, if you've been the kind of person that is at the front of a seminar or a lecture theatre, this will come naturally to you. The problem is in the debrief, it's what you need to stop trying to do, because you are facilitating a conversation, not leading the show.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a higher education or any simulation educator and you think that you have slipped into tutorial mode previously in a simulation debrief, please whack us a like, just to let us know that we're not alone in this sort of slightly unusual quest to find simulation archetypes. But the tutor exists as a simulation debrief archetype, as one of the four horsemen of the debrief apocalypse, because as educators, we are always striving to meet those learning outcomes for students.
Yeah.
We have a mission that needs to be completed. We've got a curriculum which is flowing off into the distance.
And of course, we're often the people facilitating conversations are going to be subject experts.
Yes.
So they're going to want to teach. They're going to want to deliver those pearls of wisdom.
Yeah.
Particularly in healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the tutor horseman wants learners to do well, like the critic and like the groupie really wants learners to do well. But the real value in simulation debrief is allowing, and in adult learning in general, is allowing the learner to make the connections for themselves. So probably the biggest limitation of the tutor's capacity to encourage learning is that they lead the student from point to point to point.
And unlike the groupie and the critic, which I think is a little bit harder to be self-aware about if you're naturally one way or the other.
Yeah,
I think the tutor, you can make active steps to try and rein it in a little bit. And again, if you've used if you've got something like a debrief tool or a debrief model, which helps to guide you, we'll pop a link to the episode on debriefing using the HSC debriefing model.
Yeah.
I think that helps because it will help you to just lean back and sort of say, well, actually, okay, it's the learner's opportunity to speak now.
Yeah. Can I ask an analytical question at this stage rather than giving you a learning point?
But it's definitely still a skill that needs to be acquired.
But the tutor is a noble horseman as well of the debrief apocalypse, because they really want to drive that learning point home. They can't miss a learning opportunity. They really want the learners to get the most out of it, and they want to give them, like you said, those pearls of wisdom. So they think, or they're possibly not thinking at all, that the debrief is an opportunity to take a kind of tutor-centered approach to the students' learning. And I think that's probably the biggest downfall of them, is that they take the emphasis away from the learner by making it about themselves.
So an easy way to recognize if you're going into tutor mode is who's doing the talking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what is the proportion of my voice to your voice?
Oh, it's 90-10. Yeah, I'm probably going into tutor mode.
I'm into tutorial mode. And you can retrieve it in several different ways. You can say, oh, sorry everyone, I'm going into tutorial mode.
Have some humility. Level that hierarchy.
Oops, sorry. Let me rephrase that as an open question.
Yeah.
So you can do it that way. And how do you avoid getting into that tutorial mode in the first place? How would you avoid getting into tutorial mode in the first place?
I don't. Again, we've talked about this, that whether you can go into tutorial mode or not with a debrief. And again, I think if you're dealing with an inexperienced group, first year students, you might need to dip into tutorial mode.
Yeah.
If it's with your third year learners who are about to qualify or maybe even post registration, then it definitely needs to be who's talking right now.
Yeah.
And again, it's that key is it's not tutor, it's facilitate.
Yeah, definitely. So the tutor and the hero have similarities.
Yeah, they're closely linked, but I think because they're experts in their field.
Yeah, and one of they're probably experts in their field, and also the fourth horseman of the debrief apocalypse is the hero, and the hero.
What do we mean by hero?
Right. Well, the hero really is somebody who derails the debrief by segueing into stories that are relevant from their practice.
The kind of person who's always done something.
Yeah, and again, they are a noble horseman. They are trying to situate the learning experience into something that feels real and contextual and maybe a bit funny, but something that includes learners. The danger for the hero facilitator is that they end up just talking about themselves. Because they're getting good feedback from the students because, hey, do you know what? It's really easy to listen to this person tell me the story.
And again, I don't know about you, but learners love anecdotal stories. They love experiential stories and experiential learning.
Yep.
And, I've done seminars and lectures before when that has definitely been the most captivating part of the session.
Yep.
The question is that appropriate in a simulation debrief? And I think as we've kind of hinted with the other three, a certain amount of it, yes.
Yeah.
But if it starts to derail the whole show, then you need to again be a little bit aware of that.
So the hero facilitator recognizes either consciously or subconsciously the value of storytelling for anchoring a learning point. They intuitively understand that they've captivated the group. But the question is, is a simulation debrief the right place for story time? And like you say, maybe with some learner groups, maybe in certain situations, maybe if a point will really benefit from a really clear example, then great, but not always.
I mean, you were talking before the podcast about the importance of storytelling and how it has been developed over millennia. Mankind has...
We've been telling each other stories for thousands and thousands of years. So it's really natural.
Yeah. And captivating and helps to bring people together, particularly if there's a common thread or an interest, which there will undoubtedly be to some extent with the kind of thing that we're talking about with simulation around healthcare. So I think it still has a place, but it should be a segue to facilitating that conversation.
Yeah.
And there it needs to stop rather than, oh yeah, I've done that as well. And again, I've done that. And I've probably done it better than you did.
Yeah. But it's also a great opportunity for shared vulnerability.
Yes.
So the hero, we say hero, but we probably just mean storyteller, maybe. But hero sounds cooler.
I think as well, but there's a difference between a storyteller and someone who does it to
where there's an
wrong
element
choice
of
of words,
ego.
but to a toxic level.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, toxic to the debrief, toxic to the discussion in the debrief. Yeah, no, I think that's a great observation. But
you've hit a nice point there. If it helps to flatten the hierarchy and show shared vulnerability, that's the right kind of storytelling. The hero, what they often do is create a greater hierarchy. Look how much better I am because of all of the tales and tribulations that I've had compared to you. And by the way, let's just now look at your performance in the simulation.
Yeah. Also were the students.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And we talked about this, didn't we? It is, you don't want to win the Oscar for best actor.
No.
You want to win the Oscar for best director. When you're taking a back seat.
And I think that epitomizes, what we're aiming for as a simulation facilitator, isn't it? We want to curate, direct, orchestrate, not star. Not teach, not flatter or to criticize. What we really want to do is to curate that experience so that it keeps going. We want the student to be the protagonist in the story, not the tutor or the facilitator.
So again, Lawrence, how would I know if I'm being a storyteller, being a hero?
I think it's very similar, isn't it, to the tutor? I think if you're thinking about, does it feel good? does what I'm doing feel good? And if it feels too good, it's like when you write that email, when you get that email that you want to reply to and you write that reply and it feels so good.
And then you have to delete it.
And then you have to delete it. Don't send it. But I think if the debrief is feeling too good, if you're getting like this kind of warm sort of dopaminergic surge,
narcissistic vibes,
then you pushed it too far. Definitely. So I think it comes down to the conversation pattern. Are we hearing from the group or are we hearing from the tutor? Have they become the tutor or the hero?
Yeah.
If I hear, as a facilitator, if I hear my voice too much, I'm not facilitating.
Yes.
I'm either storytelling, being a hero, or going into tutorial mode.
So, if you're new to facilitation and debrief, it might be hard and you might recognize. So, and again, I think there's some humility to be had there and going, I'm really sorry, I think I'm going off on a tangent or, I'm leading the conversation here and really I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to have that humility and recognize that and then try and bring the debrief back into.
That's part of becoming that reflexive simulation educator is being able to do that in the moment. And to recognize it and to give yourself, a break, because the reason that we've identified these 4 horsemen of the debrief apocalypse is because we see them in ourselves.
Yeah.
I have embodied all of those roles, no question. But because there are aspects of all of them which are really important. The Groupie provides reinforcement and support of elements of good practice, and that's essential. We should learn from what goes well.
Yeah, the critic is able to address areas of critical events within the simulation that need to be unpacked, because if they weren't, it could mean issues of safety in practice.
Yeah, the tutor has their eye on the learning outcomes, and they want to make sure that the learning outcomes are achieved. They want to drive the learner forward in line with the curriculum, and that's a noble aim.
Yeah, and the hero recognises the importance of learned and shared experiences through story.
Yeah, and these are all as important as each other, but like with anything in education, I think probably and in life in general.
I think in life.
Balance is
it's
key.
It's all about balance.
Yeah.
When you go to either end of the spectrum, things start to get out of balance and things can go a little bit crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And you just got to turn those sliders down.
Yeah.
Turn the critic down. Turn each of those 4 horsemen down to the right level, so that it's in equilibrium and balance.
Yeah. I definitely think co-debriefing will help that. Having a model to work with is useful, but having that, if you're fortunate enough to have that self-awareness, brilliant. I know I'm not always. I'm getting better at it.
No, because you're already wearing multiple hats and you're already multitasking. You're trying to, as we said in the previous podcast, kind of coordinate this learning experience, remember what's happened, listen to what people are saying to you, articulate your next point. So it's easy to get into a kind of habit.
It's cognitively exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let alone then being aware of your. I would imagine most people will either kind of fall into one of those four camps naturally.
Yeah.
And then being aware to sort of, like you say, bring the slider down back into center, and then use it proactively and positively rather than derailing and becoming one of the horsemen.
Exactly that. So that brings our podcast to a natural conclusion. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed this podcast, and if you do recognize one of these four horsemen of the debrief apocalypse in your own simulation practice, do please chuck us a like or a comment. And if you want to keep in touch with all things simulation, please do subscribe and hit that notification bell.
Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.